It feels like the ratio between good teen movies and bad teen movies is jarring. I almost gave up on the genre as a whole. That is, until Never Have I Ever. I should have known better, what with it being Mindy Kaling's show and all, but from the look of it, I thought, oh great, another mindless teen show where they probably talk in unrealistic lingo.
I can't believe we still have 2 months of high school left. KMNBMAASG.
Have unnecessary sexual scenes. With the most over-the-top, stereotypical, two-dimensional characters. That couldn't be further from the truth. This show is fun and original and at the same time, heart-wrenching and wholesome. Devi is the unhinged and unfiltered female hero I want to see more of. Maitreyi Ramakrishnan does an amazing job of making Devi a full-ass human being. She's messy, can be annoying, makes the wrong choices, but she's also funny, relatable, full of heart, and I love rooting for her as much as I love seeing her in a pickle. This show is one of the most amazing, nuanced, and realistic portrayals of grief I have ever seen. In the midst of Devi's mission to attracting popular Paxton Hall Yoshida, dealing with a strict mom, a perfect cousin, school and friends, throughout all the most ridiculous messes Devi gets caught up in, her dad is always on her mind. I'm going to explain what Never Have I Ever teaches us about grief, and why I'm happy it's ending after season 4. But please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell for more movie and TV related content. So in case you haven't watched it yet, let me get into the plot first. The show centers around Devi Vishwakumar, a 15-year-old Indian American Tamil girl from Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles. After her father dies suddenly, Devi loses the sensation in her legs and is unable to walk for 3 months. However, one day, she miraculously recovers and stands on her legs, all thanks to getting a better view of her crush, Paxton Hall Yoshida. After having a socially horrible freshman year, Devi goes on a mission to change her social standing in high school.
Which brings me to my plan. We're rebranding. I have chosen attainable, yet status-enhancing people for each of us today. Hey, Jonah, you smell great today.
It's Forever by Mariah Carey.
The show follows her shenanigans as she navigates through school, her relationship with her strict but well-meaning mother, Nalini, and just dealing with the consequences from a lot of her actions. Oh, and not to mention all whilst dealing with the grief of losing her father. As most of us know, there are 7 stages of grief. There's shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and lastly, processing grief. We see shock right after her father died, where Devi couldn't use her legs for 3 months. I love how it's mentioned in the very beginning that her father died during her recital, but in a sort of brushed off manner. And this is how denial comes into play. Even Devi herself keeps brushing it off and focuses more on nabbing Paxton.
Devi couldn't believe it. For the first time, she had something she wanted to write in her grief journal.
I truly didn't think it would actually be the heart of the show. Until we start digging deeper into Devi's psyche is when we realize how truly devastating and traumatic it was. And I think that's because that was exactly where Devi was at mentally. She was so shaken from her father's death, she lost the feelings in her legs for 3 whole months. She is then consumed with this goal of dating Paxton, which when we dig deeper was her way of avoiding the truth about what happened to her dad. It's engineered in such a genius way. The show took us on a transient, emotional journey that mirrored what Devi was going through. We are focusing on what Devi focuses on, but the sudden flashbacks and the dreams of her father is interspersed throughout everything Devi does, and is unavoidable.
Her uncle for her dad had dug up a memory she'd buried deep inside.
I hate you!
She was so rattled by it, she almost forgot a much more exciting new memory. She just kissed Paxton frickin' Hall frickin' Yoshida.
Anger is pretty much seen throughout the show. So my understanding of the bargaining stage is it's a stage where a person starts negotiating with themselves, people around them, or with a higher power to try and mitigate or undo their loss. And we definitely see this in the 4th episode of season 1 when during a Ganesh Puja, Devi makes a prayer.
But this year was different. She didn't want her usual things.
In your face.
She wanted something else.
Also, the bargaining stage can be when a bereaved person may seek reason where there is none, and may feel guilty and shame about how they behaved or feel in some way to blame. We see this in episode 9, where she is unable to bask in the happiness of being kissed by Paxton because she's feeling shame for having a fight with her mother before her father died. And although it's not said aloud, I think she feels shame for, first of all, having this as her last memory with her dad, and secondly, she might think she's to blame for his heart attack that happens half an hour later right before her concert. Depression is the most subtle and nuanced stage that is there throughout the seasons. In Season 2, Episode 9, we see Devi's emotions quickly change from rage to shame, and even her therapist thinks Devi is depressed.
But you're not crazy. You're just hurting, and you might even be a little depressed, and that's okay because I can help you through it.
We also see it whenever there's a flashback of her father, and in Season 2 we see that her only coping mechanism is to listen to a voicemail her father had left her. We see glimmers of acceptance in Season 1, with the scattering of the ashes and playing harp for the first time. But in Season 2, we see that there is still a lot for Devi to work through. She still makes irrational decisions based off of anger. She's definitely been distracted between Ben and Paxton. She is unable to accept her mother from moving on, when we actually see that this is Nalini's way of distracting herself from the pain of grieving. And yet, again, another step towards acceptance is seen in Season 2, when Devi finally talks to her therapist about her father's death, asking why she became paralyzed.
If I'm not crazy, how did I paralyze myself?
I think this one step forward, two steps back is a realistic portrayal of the grieving process as well. Sometimes we make a lot of progress, but revert back a couple of times, and that's okay. What this show shows is that it's human nature. Devi also realizes that her grandmother Patti had a bad last encounter with Mohan right before he died too, just further proving that nobody's perfect and we shouldn't beat ourselves up over things we regret. Mohan's death is tragic, but are beautiful lessons that everybody that has been affected can learn from, to be more present with our loved ones, to be more patient. If it's taught them anything, it's that life is too short to remain mad at the people you love the most. Now, I enjoyed Season 3. I binged the whole thing Saturday morning. But compared to the first 2 seasons, it felt like it was missing some zest that was there in the first 2 seasons. I think part of the reason for this is because our characters are all naturally progressing to be better versions of themselves. Which isn't bad. It's actually good that the writers are not stunting the growth of our characters. We have seen go through so much development in the previous seasons. If they were up to their same old ways, it would feel pointless, redundant, and would not be paying respects to the characters or us, the audience, in any way. For example, in Season 1, we see Nalini and Devi butting heads at every turn. They seriously don't know how to communicate or see eye to eye with each other, to the point that Devi moves out of the house. And then at the end of Season 1, we have this extremely touching scene of Nalini and Devi scattering Mohan's ashes together. And since then, we have seen the relationship only getting better, with Season 3 being the most mild season yet. We even see them giggling like friends and are now finally able to communicate properly with each other. If we had to watch them fight throughout the season, then this touching scene would have felt like it was all for nothing. Similarly, in Season 1, we saw Devi and her nemesis Ben's rivalry turn into friendship and even romantic. It's actually really touching to see Ben care so much for Devi. But if we were to watch them fight like they did in previous seasons, it wouldn't have stayed true to their growth. This season also had the least amount of appearances from Mohan, with 2 being Nalini's memories and Devi's first only appearing in Episode 8. I think just like Devi, I also was shocked that I didn't even realize Mohan didn't make a dream or ghostly appearance for Devi until so much later on in the season, which is a testament to her growth in her grieving stage. But also it hit so hard for her and for me to watch the guilt she feels over realizing that it had been so long since she last thought of her dad, and that she didn't even realize that his stuff had been boxed up.
Notice his stuff got tossed onto an old junk box.
Davy, what I'm hearing is that you've been happier lately and experiencing less frequent waves of grief. That means you're healing and getting to be a kid again. And that doesn't mean you love your dad any less.
That realization really choked me up, and I think it speaks volumes on how grief really does come in waves. And just because it had been a while since we last think of our loved ones, it doesn't make the pain any less. This was a momentous step for Devi, and soon after this, she plays the harp at the spring concert, which was the same concert her dad had passed 2 years prior. Our girl is finally moving on. Another significant moment was letting Paxton go.
You kinda got me through the death of my dad.
I did? How?
By being a dream.
And acknowledging that it was her pursuit of him that got her through her grieving process for the most part. This self-awareness is huge, and for her to admit it really shows signs of growth. What Never Have I Ever portrays is a beautiful, complex process of what grieving is actually like. There are times of sadness, anger, happiness, guilt, shame, and hope. I think back to WandaVision and think of Vision's profound line where he tells Wanda, "What is grief if not love persevering?" And that is where I think the very heart of this show rests. And as it turns out, the show is inspired by showrunner Mindy Kaling's personal experience when her mother died in 2012. She says, "When Devi loses her father in the first season, the grief doesn't go away. He's always there. It's the same way I feel about my mom. I always am experiencing her loss, but the way I'm experiencing her loss now, the focus changes as it gets further and further away. I can now remember not as much the times when she was sick and dying, but the lessons I learned from her when she was young and healthy. That's what I like to do in the show with Devi and her dad. Seeing her have happy memories of him and him giving her advice, I think was really important to do, instead of only focusing on the anguish she felt losing her favorite parent." This was a season full of a lot of healing, letting go, and making huge progress towards acceptance and living with her grief whilst moving on. But we still have one more season left, and from the way this show has been projecting towards, I am hopeful that we will see more growth for Devi, and that is why I'm happy that it will end after season 4. This whole show has been a teen comedy masking the grieving process. And once we have really reached the last stage of fully processing grief, ending the show then will do this amazing show the justice it deserves. So what do you guys think of Never Have I Ever? I'd love to read your comments down below, and please subscribe to my channel for more movie and TV related content. I'll see you next time. Bye!